Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second online community workshop on the greenhouse gas reduction plan. The purpose of hosting this online is to balance the health risk associated with COVID-19 while appreciating the public's input in a transparent and open manner during the current state of emergency. The public will not be able to physically attend the workshop. As a result, the city is hosting this online workshop as an opportunity for people to provide comments, feedback, and/or questions. Other alternative means of communication and feedback are also being considered to solicit additional input in the near future. We greatly appreciate your time and commitment to serve your community during this current situation, and our main goal is to work together with all of you to ensure that we are building a safe, beautiful, and thriving community in Burbank. Since this is an online workshop, please bear with us if there are any technical difficulties. Tonight's presentation will be 1.5 hours maximum, and it'll also be live on TubeU right now. It'll also be recorded and rebroadcasted on the city's TV channel, and upcoming workshops will be held online. You'll have opportunities to share your input throughout this presentation, and there's also a Q&A feature on the bottom of your computer or cell phone screen. At any time of the presentation, please type your question by clicking the Q&A icon, and we'll do our best to respond to some of the questions during the meeting. All questions and response will be posted later on the city's website. So tonight's agenda, we're going to give a little bit of background of what is the greenhouse gas reduction plan and the importance of it and how it connects as a state and regional level. And then we'll also talk about work that's completed to date and what our goal is for this project for the upcoming year. As an introduction, let me quickly just show my face. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Pan, and I'm an analyst with Community Development Department. There's also other city staff members that are here with us tonight to help answer any questions that you guys might have. And that includes Fred Ramirez from Community Development. We have John Molinar from Public Works, Craig Hampel from Public Works as well, Ron Takaguchi from Community Development, and Mandeep from Water and Power. We do have other additional staff that are also listening as well. And during the presentation, it will be hosted by me as well as our consultant, Hannah Mize and Andrew Beecher from Rincon Consultants. Hi, Hannah, I see you. Hi, Andrew. I see you too. Thank you for joining us. What is our greenhouse gas reduction plan? Back in 2013, the city had adopted the Burbank 2035 general plan, which focuses on planning the future for our city, looking at land use, housing, open space, safety, and a part of that adoption, we also included what's called a greenhouse gas reduction plan. Some cities might call it climate action plan, and ours just happens to be greenhouse gas reduction plan. And back in 2019, City Council directed staff to do an update, and the reason for it was to really consider new state legislations that have passed and also address any new technology or any changes to our operations that we want to capture in this plan. And what greenhouse gas is, and during the presentation, I might refer to it as a GHG. They're made up of gases that trap heat in our atmosphere that causes the greenhouse gas effect. So there's a lot of different types of gases, but the main gases that we hear about are methane, which is emitted from energy, industry, agriculture, and waste management and activities. And then we also have nitrous oxide that's emitted through agriculture, transportation, industry, and other activities as well. And then with carbon dioxide, the main human activity is through fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and oils for energy and transportation. The goal of the greenhouse gas reduction plan and why it's so important is because we as a community want to be able to establish these policies to show our fair share of how to reduce these emissions like the methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide to meet those long-term goals that meet with state legislation as well. And the goal for our community is to reduce and address the energy usage, to help out with air pollution, and also adapt to these different types of changes. Here in Burbank, a lot of the resources and infrastructures are actually here locally. When it comes to water and power, it's operated here. Some cities have other companies like their own water district or Southern California Edison, but here in Burbank, we're unique and we have our own water and power. What's also important is our current building infrastructure. How do we use our buildings? Do we use our buildings efficiently? How old are our buildings and what can we do to make it more energy efficient? And then also in Burbank, we have our own landfill, and that's a picture of an aerial view of our current landfill. So when we talk about our greenhouse gas reduction plan, everyone is definitely a stakeholder in this. When we talk about who is being impacted on a day-to-day basis, and we hear a lot about it in the news, it's our residents, business employers, and the people who work in Burbank, and even the people who visit Burbank. And we're hoping that this greenhouse gas reduction plan is something that is a collaborative effort on everyone's end. And it's so good to hear and see the attendees here tonight to be part of that solution with us. And so definitely when we go through the proposed measures and what the plan entails, we definitely want that community feedback on what can we do together. And so I'll leave it to Andrew Beecher from Rincon Consultants to talk about what's driving this plan that we're trying to update that we have.
Thank you, Karen. So when we're talking about what's driving this plan to be updated, there was already a 2013 greenhouse gas reduction plan in place. And now we're doing an update because since the time of adoption of that 2013 greenhouse gas reduction plan, there's been numerous pieces of state legislation that kind of increase the greenhouse gas reduction targets of the state. And so with the greenhouse gas reduction plan, we're trying to align with state legislation that encourages local governments to reduce municipal and community greenhouse gas emissions proportionate with the state goals. The first greenhouse gas reduction plan, 2013, the goals there were set based on Assembly Bill 32, which was adopted in 2006. This set greenhouse gas emission reduction targets to reduce emissions to below 1990 levels by 2020. It also set a long-term target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to below 1990 levels by 80% by 2050. Since then, in 2016, Senate Bill 32 was adopted. This sets a longer-term goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 by 40% below 1990 levels, which is a bit more stringent than what was passed with Assembly Bill 32. And then furthermore, since then in 2018, Executive Order B5518 was signed, and that aims to have the state be completely carbon neutral by 2045. Looking at these targets in general, we're trying to align the greenhouse gas reduction targets in Burbank to align with these targets to give our proportionate share of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The city of Burbank has reached the 1990 level target that was set by Assembly Bill 32. And so now we're looking at to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with this updated plan to meet these longer term goals of 2030 and 2045. So here on this screen, I want to show the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that are being set with this updated plan. The state bases these on a 1990 baseline, but for the city of Burbank, we don't have a 1999 greenhouse gas inventory to go off of. We don't have that baseline. But we do have is a baseline for 2010, which was performed with the 2013 greenhouse gas reduction plan. So what we do is we set a reduction target that's based on that 2010, but aligns with those same emission reduction levels that the state is looking to strive for. So as I mentioned, the 2020 goal has since passed, and the city of Burbank did reach that goal. And we know this because we performed a greenhouse gas inventory update in 2019. And a greenhouse gas inventory is where we assess all the relevant sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the city from activities such as transportation, energy use, waste generation, and water use. So looking forward to 2030, setting this target to align with the Senate Bill 32. Compared to 2010 baseline, Burbank is setting a target for 49% reduction below this 2010 baseline. Looking forward to 2035, that serves as an intermediate target on our way towards the long-term goals of carbon neutrality, and that aligns with the general plan horizon year. And then furthering to 2045, looking to align with the carbon neutrality of the state, reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 100%. And then just looking at this column on the right, we mentioned that there's a 2019 greenhouse gas inventory we performed. And so we're looking at reducing emissions below that baseline that we've established with this new greenhouse gas reduction plan update. We have some numbers here on the side. These are the amount of carbon dioxide that we need to reduce emissions in metric tons of carbon dioxide. A metric ton of carbon dioxide is about how much carbon dioxide a car would emit driving from here to Pittsburgh, just to give an idea of what that number means. But looking at further in the future, there's going to be a significant effort to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. Looking at about 300,000 metric tons in 2030, and then almost 1 million metric tons in 2045. The state legislation that's been passed will make significant effort in helping the city reduce these emissions, but there still will be some piece that the city is looking to pick up and is looking to leverage the community and resources that it can to help reach this gap.
Thank you, Andrew. And so regarding that 2020 goal, some of the questions that we've gotten and even in our past community meetings is to give examples of how we met that goal. And with city side as well as the community, there's an effort on both ends on how we reach that goal. To give you an example is our recent development project that's near the airport. This project is proposed to construct 6 industrial buildings with 9 2-story buildings. There's also retail and restaurant and a 6-story hotel. And this project is near our airport and it is anticipated to be completed sometime this year. Some of the sustainability features that are included in part of this project is the installation of rooftop PV as renewable energy resource to use renewable sources. There's also going to be planting of at least 1,000 trees. There's also going to be 177 electrical vehicle charging stations and installation of level 2 EV chargers at the location. With this project, they're planning to also incorporate daylight lighting with clear story glass and skylights for natural lighting. There's also plans to recycle and reuse existing asphalt during construction. They're also going to install cool roofs over industrial and office areas. And they're also going to have new streets to incorporate a City of Burbank's Green Street policy that includes bike and pedestrian amenities that is consistent with our Complete Streets plan. The buildings are LEED Silver certification for core and shell of buildings. The next slide just shows you pictures that it's currently in construction right now. So if you were to drive near the airport. Another example of how we met that 2020 goal is looking at our water conservation as a city. So when you're in Burbank and you're at a park or you're walking through the streets near your landscape, you'll most likely have seen these purple signs that that says the city is using recycled water. And within our greenhouse gas reduction plan, it outlines that our goal is to reach 1 billion gallons of recycled water annually. And throughout the years, we've been meeting that goal, and sometimes we've exceeded it as well. And since the adoption, we really hit that target.
You have to have exceeded it if you actually hit it.
And so with this plan, we have working on the schedule and trying to do a new update. And so far what we've accomplished is looking at what is that baseline of inventory of GHG? What are we forecasting and what are we targeting? And tonight's meeting is really focused on the next part of it, which is looking at that strategy together of how we're going to accomplish this as a community. But before I get to the exciting part with the proposed measures, I just want to take a quick break right now to see if there's any questions that someone might have that's an attendee. If you are on your computer or on your cell phone, all you would need to do is click on the raise hand icon, or you can type your Q&A question that's on the bottom and we'll be able to respond to that question. But if there's no questions, that works as well, and we can definitely dive into what the proposed measures are for the plan.
Paula, you can now unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my questions and holding this meeting tonight. I'm just wondering, because you were talking about how you're meeting the strategies of water conservation, if in those strategies you're actually following some of the state regulations that have been revised to ensure that surface and groundwater resources are protected, such as the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, and if you can give examples of how you're incorporating that.
Hannah and Andrew, do you guys want to take that question?
Sure. Thank you for your question. Yes, we definitely plan on incorporating the water efficient landscapings in as part of our measures and continuing to enforce those measures as part of that. And also looking at the continuing to provide recycled water as well. Let me know if that answers your question.
Hi, this is Paula. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just interested in these are specific state regulations that really look at landscape water efficiency standards, I'm not sure if it's answering the question or not. I mean, I know recycled water is part of it, but if there's more example of how you're dealing with rainwater capture, how you're dealing with managing water so it doesn't run off into stormwater management, issues.
Right. Definitely. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, as we are definitely including, the we call it MWILO, but those requirements are currently being enforced in the city, and we definitely want to continue those. And also in the urban water management plans, there are a number of conservation programs including there that we would like to continue to implement as part of water reduction, and then furthering the discussion on stormwater runoff, looking at exploring adopting a greenscaping ordinance that would reduce or increase permeable surfaces in new development. And mostly relying on continuing to implement the state requirements and enforcing those, which is a key piece of ensuring that those things actually happen.
Andrew, everyone, this is Ron Takiguchi. I'm one of the assistant directors in community development in the city building official. So Paula, thank you for your question. And if I could just expand on what Andrew shared, and that is, you're correct. We do have a lot of existing measures here in Burbank. And as you probably and others know, that we are in a watershed because we have the LA River running through our city, that the State Regional Water Quality Control Board is very meticulous in making sure that our monitoring and our storm water runoff does not affect the watershed. So we do annual reporting for storm water runoff, and through construction sites, through development, through just our hardscape, that we minimize or we make sure that there is no stormwater runoff. So that is part of the plan, and that is continuing what we currently have in place. And because of the higher state measures to protect our watershed, we're confident that that is good incorporation to this this plan overall. And Paul, if I may ask, is there anything else related to that we could help you with?
Hi, thank you very much for the answer. That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, sorry, should I just go ahead with my question?
Karen, I believe so. Yes, please, Dan, is it correct?
Yes.
Yes, please, Dan.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I should just go or not. Yeah, so I was just curious. I know part of the plan I saw outlined is adding a lot of electric vehicle charging stations throughout the public infrastructure in the city. I'm a renter, and I know over 50% of the residents in Burbank are renters. And one of the things that I've always been wondering about is or hoping that would happen is some sort of program to incentivize like multi-family unit apartment complexes to add electric vehicle charging stations. this would kind of open up the ability for a lot of renters to be able to like purchase electric vehicles and then to be able to kind of take advantage of that public infrastructure that will then also be there. As right now, as it stands, it's kind of difficult to think about rent or purchasing an electric vehicle as a renter, I'm sure in many of the complexes, because there's just no infrastructure there for it. So I didn't know if there were any plans to kind of create any sort of incentive program or pressure for private apartment complexes to kind of upgrade their infrastructure as well.
Well, Dan, this is Ron Takiguchi again. I'll start off and I'll let Hannah and Andrew give the details. But you raise an excellent point. I think one of the biggest challenges to electric vehicle charging is, of course, existing multifamily buildings. In fact, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, they wrote a paper on that and the challenges of that, because it's not just providing a charging station, because the question is, what is the capacity of that existing electrical service? So adding one electric vehicle charger may then require an upgrade to the entire system. And that's one of the things that's recognized. And it's easier, of course, to do this with brand new buildings. In fact, there have been ordinances and requirements that capacity requirements must be considered. That's actually in the Cal Green Code, that it's not only having the conduit and the parking spaces designated for future charging, but also consider the capacity. So say the electrical service might have to go from 800 amps to 1,000 amps, just anticipation of future electric vehicles. So that's kind of the preamble to multifamily. Hannah, Andrew, do you have more on that?
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for starting it off. And thank you, Dan, for a great question. As Ron was saying, there is, and you were saying as well, Dan, there is challenge with multifamily developments. You know, I'm a renter as well, and I don't have anywhere to charge an EV. So I don't own an electric vehicle currently. So I totally understand the struggle there. And, you know, as part of this, we definitely, as part of this plan, we want to have measures where we can increase the availability of chargers to facilitate this transition to electric vehicles. It's kind of the chicken or the egg problem, but it seems that having more chargers sooner is going to incentivize more people to adopt electric vehicles. So one thing that is already happening is Burbank Water and Power is working to help install electric vehicle chargers throughout the city, but then also through additional measures through this greenhouse gas reduction plan. We're looking at the adoption of REACH codes, which are local amendments to the building code, and looking at ways to get both existing commercial and multifamily buildings and new constructions to install electric vehicle charging spaces. So whenever, if there's a large retrofit of or like a large permit to renovate a commercial or multifamily building, looking at requirements to install EV charging spaces or EV ready spaces, and then also for new construction as well, looking to meet specific standards of a certain number of charging spaces for each number of parking spaces that are in the development. And I hope that answers your question, Dan.
It does, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and this is Ron again. And one thing that I like to say about multifamily apartments is, and one of the things that the Office of Planning and Research recognized, and that is, who pays for the electricity for charging a personal electric vehicle? And there's ways to do that, but that's also part of the challenge because, you know, of course, that electric vehicle charger has to be in a specific space, and therefore who gets the opportunity to charge that. So little details that we are looking at as part of development of this plan. And we do have Mr. Joe Flores. He's with Burbank Water and Power. And I think Joe could add more to this discussion. Joe?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a question that we've been wrestling with. And this is the approach that the utility is taking to try to help to facilitate the adoption in a community that has more than 50% of our residents, living in multifamily homes. What we're trying to do is come up with a combination approach that takes a look at curbside charging in combination with providing incentives to multifamily property owners. But in addition to that, provide services that take the complexity out of the entire arrangement. It's a heavy challenge, and we are going to be going to council later this calendar year to be able to refresh our existing incentives that we're going to be that we have available for commercial customers, including multifamily residential property owners. We are going to be looking at installing in the neighborhood of 500 public chargers out in the street, and we want to strategically place them near multifamily so that becomes an additional option for consistent charging availability for folks living in multi-unit dwellings. And then on top of that, we want to be able to provide the necessary incentives in order for folks to actually acquire those vehicles who are living multifamily units. So we recognize that there are different situations in multifamily units, such as if you're living in a complex where you have an identified spot, and that identified spot does have access to the electric service that is providing service to the inside the home, we want to be able to facilitate that. But we also recognize there's going to be times where there is not a dedicated space for individuals, and that you want to be able to cycle people through the various charging availability there. So it's one of the more difficult challenges that we have in facilitating that adoption in multifamily, but we do have a approach to that gives multi-pronged opportunities that we think is going to be effective. And you'll start to see more assertive action in that area starting within this calendar year.
That sounds great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Karen, are we entertaining other live questions? Or Hannah or Andrew, are we entertaining more questions at this time?
I think it's been about, let's see, we have a couple more. It might be 10 minutes close, but we can maybe do one more, and then the rest of these we can kind of address at the, after if there's time, or follow up, email or post on the website. So let's see, is there another hand up? I see a couple questions in the chat as well. Let's go with all right, there's a question here that says, what happens if we don't meet the goals of AB 32, SB 32, EOB 55, etc.? Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anna. Appreciate the question, Tamala. So there isn't at the moment any current punishment from the state, I guess, for lack of a better word, for not reaching those targets. But the intent of the plan is to have an iterative process with trying to reach these. So with the greenhouse gas reduction plan, we want to include triennial or so, every 3 years, updates to reassess how everything has been working in the plan up to that point. So looking at how we've been tracking the progress on each one of these measures that are being included. And then at those 3-year or so points, looking back and refining measures or adding new measures or even eliminating measures that didn't work so well, and kind of trying to reassess things as we go to try to get closer and closer to those targets. And at this point, we're trying to show a proportional share of reducing those greenhouse gas emissions. So there isn't strict repercussions from the state for not, but the intent is to try the best to reach those goals and continue to iterate this plan in order to do so.
Awesome. And does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I do have a part 2 to that as well. Because the state is has these requirements for the city, is the state also requiring that cities submit plans to the state to show that they are on track, or is this more of an internal plan just for us to, as a city, to keep track? And since they are also requiring that the cities do this, are they then going to provide resources and grants and that kind of thing in kind of general recourse, or is that something that the city has to seek out in order to achieve the goals, in order to help the city move forward with specific issues that the city is facing?
Yes, definitely. Thank you again for the follow-up question. Yeah, this plan is intended to be a local plan. So there isn't necessarily a submittal to the state or any mechanism like that for tracking these at the state level. But one really big benefit of having this type of plan is that it makes the city eligible for a lot of different grant opportunities. And there are grant opportunities that are specific to cities who have these types of plans and have certain types of measures regarding transportation or waste reduction or other aspects that relate to funding mechanisms. And I believe that addressed most of your question. And I'm sorry, I might have missed the second part of your question.
No, that addressed both questions at the same time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the great question.
Awesome. I think we're good to move forward now, and then we can address the rest of the questions either at the end, or if there's not time at that point, we can do that offline, and happy to, if they come through or continue to ask them, feel free, and we can address them accordingly. Karen, I'm not sure if you're talking, but we can't hear you. I can run through the GHG inventory though. I'm going to take this slide. And then Karen, if you want to jump in at any point, please feel free. But essentially, this is a summary of the 2019 greenhouse gas emissions at the community level. And there are a variety of numbers on the screen here. And essentially, the main point we're looking for is the proportion of where the emissions come from. So as kind of demonstrated here, the majority of the emissions in the city come from energy use and transportation. So those are kind of the big areas that also we're going to want to reduce, and choose measures from that reduce these emissions going forward. So a big part of the plan, the remainder of the emissions come from solid waste and water. So there are some other pieces of the puzzle here, and we also have those measures in the plan as draft right now, and of course want review on those as well. But the areas where we have the most measures and the biggest reductions are coming from these energy and transportation sectors, VMT specifically, trying to either remove that or electrify vehicles, use alternative transportation, including walking, biking, transit, stuff like that. And then for energy, there's a couple of options, kind of fuel switching, maybe from, fossil fuels to electricity, or to non-GHG free energy is really where we're trying to go with that one. So we'll jump into the measures, but before that, I want to provide a little bit of background on what these look like. So we can
Thank you, Hannah. I think hopefully you can hear me now.
We can hear you. We can hear you. Yes. Awesome.
Sorry about that. I was talking to myself the whole time, I guess. But thank you, Hannah, for going over the 2019 GHG inventory level. That assessment was really important to us to capture more of what's happening currently so we could do a better job of planning out this greenhouse gas reduction plan update. And so next slide. The goal of the update is to show you the general overview of those draft goals and proposed measures. These proposed measures may be revised during this process of public input and review, and we'll make sure to have this draft available to the public as well before we actually adopt the plan itself. And definitely with these goals and measures that we're going to talk about today, they're going to be reviewed on an annual basis. Hannah, do you want to talk a little bit about how the plan is structured?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to run through this. So this is kind of set up similar to how the 2035 GGRP was set up, and essentially has an umbrella sort of over the strategies under which the measures fall, and then actions fall under that. And essentially these strategies are aspirational statements. The measures are these longer range policies, and then the actions kind of tell the story and provide specific programs or steps that support the measures and allow the measures to be implemented. These measures that we're looking at really were built on a set of pillars, and we're going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. And that's kind of how we built these actions. So it's really important. I think this goes back to one of your questions earlier, Dan. The pillars that we're specifically building all of our actions and measures on is equity, funding, greenhouse gas reduction, education, structural change, and partnership. And I can provide a little bit more information. I know that those, we're all pretty familiar with these terms, but in the sense of this plan, what we're talking about is equitable measures that are fair and not only remove, but also aim to reduce the burden of climate change impacts from disadvantaged communities. That's something really, really important for all climate action planning, and specifically with this team that we've been working on. It's been something that we've talked about a lot, and that involves, multifamily housing, making sure that people that maybe are, living in different positions have all of the same resources and ability to implement these measures kind of equitably across the stage. So that's something that's really important as a foundational pillar or component of our measures. Another one that we have is structural change, which essentially is an establishment of implementable programs and policies, things like reach codes that Andrew was talking about, or other items where we can make things, going forward a little bit different. We're going to have to think a little bit differently as we move forward. There are, a lot of the low-hanging fruit have already been picked as far as GHG reductions go. So going forward, what does this look like? We're going to have to make a little bit of change. And that's another component. And we want that to be equitable. So all a big picture here, the economical piece really relates to the measures being financially feasible. We want that, again, for everybody, that includes incentives and support from different parties, grants and stuff like that. So again, like Andrew was mentioning, and a question that had been brought up, is a lot of the reason for this plan is to get potential funding for things going forward. And some of these things are big picture, so really want to have opportunities for that. Next up, education. It's really hard to know what to do if we don't know why and how. So that's something that we've worked into all of the measures and have some sort of educational component, either for the community, specifically for schools in some instances, for developers, if that's the kind of community that we're looking at. So across each of the measures, there is some sort of educational component. They also connect with the community and resources. That kind of goes without saying, but this plan is something where we want everybody to be involved, and we want to establish partnerships and provide an opportunity for these partnerships to flourish. So really a cool opportunity here. And then again, another one that's a little bit more straightforward, but providing these significant greenhouse gas emission reductions. So the point of the plan at the end of the day is to reduce emissions in line with the state's goals. There's a lot of other benefits, and we want to work all of those things in here, but rubber meets the road. We're really looking to provide these greenhouse gas reductions going forward.
So with these measures, we've actually been working on it in the past 12 months, and we've been reaching out to stakeholders that have definitely provided a lot of input to us, as well as the community. Last year, we had a survey and we got response from residents, businesses to get a better understanding of what the needs are or what they would like to see in our community. And so definitely with these measures, we received assistance with Sustainable Commission, Transportation Commission, Youth Board, our Burbank Water and Power Board, our RISE participants, as well as the public. And I definitely want to give them credit to them. And we're going to make sure that we have ongoing conversations with the community as much as that we can. So along with how the structure of the greenhouse gas reduction plan update is, there's going to be 11 main strategies on how we tackle this together. The first strategy is what we call as a cornerstone, and it's to develop an affordable housing electrification program to help retrofit low income and affordable housing units in Burbank to electric. So what does that mean? In Burbank, we have a number of affordable housing units that's being operated by our Burbank Housing Corporation. And we definitely have as a strategy within our plan to work with Burbank Housing Corporation to provide these discounted electric appliances and equipments, as well as technical assistance with installation and electrical panel and circuit upgrades to retrofit at a time of place of replacement for upgrades of appliances and equipments in affordable housing units. And the focus really here is to phase out that natural gas and to have more people to use electrical. The second strategy is what we call building energy. We included this as a new strategy compared to what we had adopted back in 2013, knowing that when it comes to our building, this is what is the biggest producer of GHG emissions. And when we're looking at buildings, that could include our single family homes, our multifamily units, businesses, city infrastructure and facilities. And definitely this is a huge component on how we address GHG emissions. So within our strategy, there's action items that you'll see that includes assessing higher efficiency with new and existing buildings, and to also promote the environmental benefits of electrification with our builders, property owners, contractors. As a city, there's a lot of things that are moving, whether it be homes or businesses or larger infrastructures, and we definitely want to start educating our public, especially those who are pulling permits out, to get more information about how we could best retrofit our existing buildings or even new buildings itself. The third strategy is what we call electricity generation. And this is focused on how do we get to a point where we are GHG free with our existing buildings. And so with that strategy, which is a goal that we're trying to meet by 2040, we have certain programs that are currently in place that we're trying to promote, such as Burbank Water's residential green rate premium program. Within this plan, we also are looking at installing more solar capacity by using our parking structures roof around the cities as means to increase our load capacity where high loads from electric vehicle charging is likely. And then we're also within our plan, our goal is to conduct a feasibility study to really find these locations and be able to install the local renewable energy generation or energy storage projects. The fourth strategy is looking at reducing passenger car vehicle miles traveled. And recently at a council meeting, we adopted what's called a Complete Streets Plan back in June of last year. And the Complete Streets Plan just how you see the plan itself. That was an opportunity where we are looking at our goals and policies to identify new infrastructure guidelines and develop an implementation plan for future projects. The complete stream plan also identifies benchmarks for ways in which the city can improve safety, sustainability, health, transportation equity, connectivity, and economic vitality to build these better neighborhoods and develop responsibly in the future. And so that plan, we'll make sure to have it available to the public as part of this update. And with this plan, we know how important it is to have, to have people get out of their cars and to be able to bike or walk more, and to improve that infrastructure will definitely help encourage that. And so with that plan, we did propose 3 projects, and they were all approved. And all 3 projects deal with pedestrian improvements. There's one in downtown near Bollywood Place at First Street and Olive, where we're closing out a certain access of the Bollywood Place at First Street, and we're installing high visibility crosswalks, and we're also going to construct a pedestrian curb ramp. With that project, we also are trying to improve bike pedestrian minor improvement projects. The first one will be on Front Street between First Street and Olive Bridge Underpass. And the goal of that project is to improve bicyclist safety and first and last mile connectivity between downtown and the downtown Metrolink station. And the other project that was adopted with this plan is looking at First Street between San Fernando Boulevard and Verdugo Avenue. And that's to improve bicyclist safety and enhancing first and last mile connectivity as well through the downtown and the downtown Metrolink station, and provide transit amenities. The 5th strategy that's outlined in our greenhouse gas reduction plan is what's called a transportation demand management. And that's where we're looking at how can we connect with other businesses and other companies that are in Burbank to really talk about what's needed in terms of transportation mode. And so within the plan, it outlines that we would work with what's called Burbank TMO, our Transportation Management Organization, to continue to implement any outreach strategies to increase membership and active participation within the program. Burbank Transportation Management Organization, that we call TMO, is a private sector and nonprofit organization that was formed in the early 1990s to bring together the employers, developers, business owners, and others to collectively establish these policies and program services for their employees, looking at peak hours, trying to resolve any problems with connectivity to other jobs. That's a way for us to be able to connect to other employers who are part of this TMO to address those needs with different types of commutes. The 6th strategy that's outlined in the plan is called zero emission vehicles. And Dan brought up a really good question. And that's definitely part of this plan, is to install more EV charging stations by 2030 through customer rebates and direct installation of charging stations. This is something that we've been hearing from the community, and we definitely want to have partnerships where we give an opportunity to promote these zero emission vehicles, whether it be through city events, social media, and being able to provide this information through our website is part of our goal with this plan. I'm almost there. I'm on the 7th strategy. I'm almost to 11th, but the 7th strategy is regarding the water energy nexus, and that's to implement the public education campaign to highlight the water conservation. And the goal is to update the recycled water master plan And just like what we talked about previously before, we're also looking at the urban water management plan, and that's in the queue to be updated. But those plans definitely exist today. The eighth strategy is the organic waste diversion. And this is to help us meet what's the SB 1383 organics and recycling requirements by reducing organic waste disposals by 75% by 2025. With SB 1383, there's definitely a lot of state regulations looking at organic waste. One of the things that we outlined in this plan is that we want to engage with all of our waste haulers that are operating within the city to discuss these types of requirements for waste haulers. So that might include organics, receptacles and labeling requirements. And we're also looking at policies to comply with the state regulations. And we also want to educate the public as well through our schools or the public in general about what is food waste prevention, how do we do that, and providing more educational programs for all ages. The ninth strategy is related to carbon, and that's where we are planning to plant about 2,000 net new trees by 2030. The 10th strategy is related to city government actions. We hear how important it is that our community has our own greenhouse gas reduction plan. And within this update, we do want to highlight that this will be reviewed annually. And we are planning to review it annually with an online tool through our website that you'll see in the upcoming months. Once this is adopted, to really outline all these strategies that we're talking about today, and what we're actually going to, what we've actually are going to accomplish that year, and how far we're going to meet our target. There are also city government actions that includes looking at our city streetlights and outdoor lighting to be LED. We're also looking at our city facilities, whether it be through parks or in general with our community services building, on ways that we could electrify our existing buildings by 2030. We're also going to be assessing city operations, even with city employees, on how they commute. And then we also plan on partnering up with groups, whether it be regional efforts with nonprofits, entertainment, businesses, and Chamber of Commerce. And the 11th strategy, which is the last one, it's regarding adaptation. And that's where we're looking at, as we go through this plan, there's definitely changes with our environment, and we want to be able to assess and be able to adapt to those changes. And so within this strategy, we plan on identifying any community locations that we could provide as shelter, evacuations, clean air centers for any future climate emergency events. And that includes a partnership with LA County to educate our community and find resources together for our community. Thank you so much for hanging in there. That is the 11 strategies that we want to include in our plan. I'll stop here for right now since I mentioned a lot of information. This would be a good opportunity if anyone has any questions regarding the 11 strategies, or whether you want to raise your hand at this point through your icon or through a Q&A, we can definitely answer your questions. So I'll give you guys a few minutes, and feel free if you would like to raise your hand, or you like to input a question through the Q&A.
Tamala, you can now unmute yourself. And For everyone raising their hands, please note that you are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for reviewing that information. It's probably got a lot more detail in the report itself, which I haven't yet had a chance to look at, but I do want to have a few follow-up questions on some of these. For the city actions, one thing I noticed that was not mentioned that I'm going to guess is in the plan is electrifying the city fleets. So could you speak to that? On the transportation portion, I'm wondering if there's anything in the plan that addresses remote work. And now that we have seen changes in how people work, potentially incentivizing, especially our larger businesses, to encourage people to work remotely so they don't have to drive into town. And then also for the waste reduction part, the organic waste reduction part, which I'm really excited to see. I did not see mentioned either the businesses being involved. I think that a large portion of there's the residential organic waste, which is really important. But I think a large portion of the organic waste comes from our business communities. Restaurants are the obvious ones, but you can also see organic waste coming from our studios and larger businesses that have either on-site food distribution or kitchens and that kind of thing. So could you address those three particular issues? Thank you.
Hi, Kamala. Thanks again for your great questions. I really appreciate them. As for your first question about electrifying the city fleet, you are 100% right. We didn't go into all the details with this kind of general overview of the measures, but we are definitely including looking at ways to electrify the city's fleet, including exploring procurement policies with new vehicles. And that's mostly related to the passenger vehicles in the city fleet, just since the technology is readily available there. And then as for your second question relating to remote work, I believe, as Karen mentioned, we're looking at the potential for telecommuting with city employees, based on what we've all experienced. There is a lot of potential to work from home, but with a lot of the city employees, a lot of them have to be on staff. Public Works has to be there. The water and power people have to be there. But looking at having a portion of the city employees work from home in 2030 and setting a target for that. And then also related to the community, when we're talking about the transportation management organization, as there are trip reduction targets that are set for them to meet for every number of employees that work, they have a target of having a lower amount of actual vehicle trips. And a great way that employers can meet that target is by having people not show up to work at all and telecommuting. So, that will kind of be an implicit way of them reaching those targets. But definitely, since that technology is apparently here and it's ready to happen, people are ready to work from home, it should be an effective way for employers and members of the transportation management organization to reach those trip reduction targets. And then as for your third question related to waste reduction, Senate Bill 1383 has quite a few requirements for reducing organic waste. And it doesn't just apply to residential waste generators, it also applies to commercial, and it also has pretty stringent requirements for food recovery. It aims to have 20% edible food recovery in the next 5 years. And then also looking at ways to distribute that recovered food to the community through food banks. So it definitely looks to include restaurants, but as well as other larger commercial entities to meet these organic waste reduction targets that are set by the Senate Bill 1383. And those are all definitely included in the plan and looking to meet all of the requirements of Senate Bill 1383 to get that organic waste reduction. I hope that answers your questions. Please feel free to let me know if you'd like any clarification there.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If there's no further question, I'll move forward with the presentation. In terms of next steps, we have our community meeting today, but we also want to share with you the actual details of the measures. And so sometime this month, we'll make sure to send the measures out so you'll be able to see it. We're hoping to have the actual complete plan updated for the public in early spring, and we're tentatively scheduled to go to planning board in May, and then the actual adoption to city council in June 8th is what we're aiming for. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I do want the greenhouse gas reduction plan, whether it be draft or the actual update, to be an ongoing conversation. And so tonight, and it's pretty rude of me, but I do have one action item for everyone, and it's to really share this information with your friend or your neighbor or business. With this update, as you can see, even with the strategy, it's definitely a community effort on the city, businesses, residents, guests, visitors to really pull in together to think about, how we consume and use certain amenities that's being provided to us. And the more that we educate each other and the more that we're able to get this information out to help us make better decisions on a day-to-day basis, will be a huge player in making sure that we reach our goal collectively by 2030 and 2045 is what our plan is. But definitely, if you can, as squeeze it in, whether you're at the gym or the market, to be able to share this information to as many people as you can. And we welcome feedback in any way. I definitely see more Q&A questions through the panel, and we'll make sure to answer your questions through our website. And you can also email us at climateactionplan@burbankca.gov. We are going to do as much outreach as possible as we can. And so I'll be available at Farmers Market this Saturday if anyone has any questions. With that outline, I don't think we will have another community meeting for this, but definitely there is an ongoing conversation with everyone that's here today, and you'll be able to see our measures and continue to ask us questions through email or a phone call. And the next slide, I just want to thank everyone who's on the call today. And here's more information about where you can find our current greenhouse gas reduction plan, as well as hearing our past community meetings and survey. That information is posted on our website at burbankca.gov/climate-action-plan. And then you'll also have my email address and phone number if you wanted to talk to us directly. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.